do a lot of professional learning with educators, schools, and organizations around learner variability and how to use learning sciences research on the Learner Variability Navigator to support powerful learning experiences like we're going to be talking about today. Prior to coming to Digital Promise, I was an educator, a principal, and a director of academics for a combination of 20 years. And so really excited to dig into this topic with you today.
And I'm Todd DeSando, and I'll be your moderator. I'll be dropping some links into the chat. And if you have any comments or questions, feel free to put those in there as well. We have a few norms that we are going to go over prior to our session. So the first one is just to mute your mics unless you're invited to speak. And of course, use the chat to ask questions, to add comments, or to further any discussion that we have. Be mindful, okay? We're all here for the same reason. We're all here to learn. So please be mindful of the work that we're doing. Be present as fully as possible. We only have an hour together to discuss this wonderful topic, and we want to make sure that we can get as much out of that hour as we possibly can. So please be present within the time that we are together, and of course, be kind to yourself and others throughout this entire learning process. And I will turn it back over to Jessica, and she will kick us off.
Awesome. So just to kind of check in around this topic, I wanted to start with this question. What is something you learned where being part of a group helped deepen your experience? And so this could be professional skills, maybe hobby, sports related. And so if you can think of a time, feel free to put that in the chat, or if you want to come off mute, I'm happy to share directly. And so while you're thinking, I'll just share a few examples of my own, just to, in case that plant some seeds of ideas here. But it could be something where you joined a book club around a topic, or you joined a Facebook group to learn more. One of the things that I'm interested in learning more about is gardening. And so I find, talking to other people, taking a class, joining, groups really helps improve and deepen my experience and understanding. So I'm seeing a couple of examples of having multiple perspectives in groups is helpful. Making sure that everyone has roles in groups is helpful. Learning how to use new tech, thank you, Luis, is helpful when others are involved. I think hearing other people's experiences and sharing frustrations even can be a helpful part of learning something new, and sharing best practices. Because there's so many nuances, right? When you're learning something and implementing it, whether it's on the job or, a hobby or something that you're doing for fun. Awesome. Social skills, yes. Being part of collaborative learning experiences does help deepen our experience and our social skills, sometimes sharpen them, challenge them. Depending on what it is we're learning and who we're learning alongside. Great, so if you could go to the next slide. Today, we're going to be talking about how we can use strength-based learning to support collaboration and help enhance being part of the group, enhance those social experiences. And I'm going to share some different practices and activities around strengths-based learning that supports learner variability and the understanding that everyone kind of has this unique combination of strengths and challenges. And so we're going to dive into that a bit more. And so we can go to the next slide. So today we're talking about collaborative and connected. And this is a domain of powerful learning that really looks at how learners who reach deeper levels of understanding when they have opportunities to discuss diverse viewpoints, address misconceptions, and solve problems together, which is a lot of what you were saying in the chat earlier, right? The opportunity to hear different viewpoints on things, maybe help troubleshoot, and do things together where you have certain roles and things like that is really helpful. And so by structuring learning experiences that use technology to promote higher levels of collaboration and connectivity is something I think Bill's schools are really well poised to do. And so teachers can help build the skills that students need for the future. And we know that a lot of jobs require both using technology and collaboration and social skills. And so the more experience students have with this in the classroom, the better we are equipping them for 21st century learning. You can go to the next slide. And so research has shown that in large part, learning and knowledge is socially constructed. And so building in reasoning and problem solving skills is an important part of the learning experience. And powerful learning gives students a voice in the classroom by empowering them as experts in their own right. And this is really, I think, something that is important to understand is when we make this shift to more student-centered learning, which is what powerful learning is asking us to do, is really to help students see themselves as experts. And then they can engage in groups differently when they feel like they have strengths and things to share and that their voice and expertise is recognized. And so that's really where having strengths-based approach to learning can help and support this idea that we see in the collaborative and connected pillar of powerful learning. And so peer teaching strategies is of course part of that, but we're going to look at some other ways to really push this strengths-based idea. Also, just a quick note that strong social awareness and relationship skills are associated with better social adjustment and academic achievement, as well as lower levels of conduct problems and emotional distress. And so having these opportunities for kids to collaborate and connect, I think can really address both academic needs as well as social and emotional needs. And so again, the strength-based approach just helps us intentionally identify and communicate and harness students' assets across many aspects of the whole child. Great. Sorry, just one second. So one thing that's important when we're thinking about strengths is that we're not just focused on academic strengths, that we're really considering this whole child framework. And so what does the student bring? You know, what strengths do they bring from their home, their culture, their background? You know, maybe their social and emotional skills are strengths, even if they're struggling academically, but they're able to manage their frustrations, or they're highly social with kids, even if they, you know, they're peers, but they may not have as much strength academically. Really understanding that we need to view strengths in this larger lens to help students feel like they have an expertise and they belong in that space and then can engage more comfortably. So today, as we're talking about, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of what are teachers doing, what are the students doing, and what are coaches doing to support this strength-based approach to collaborative learning. And so first we want to think, what is a teacher doing to support this? They are actively identifying strengths beyond academics. And there's lots of ways we can do that. We'll share some examples of those, but you can use prompts, you can use surveys, really intentionally asking and naming strengths in parent conferences, and of course, using your powers of observation. Those are important things for teachers to be doing. And then what's also really important is that we're naming those strengths in feedback, and that teachers are also modeling how to give strength-based feedback to peers so that as students are collaborating and working together, they can name those strengths. And this doesn't mean that we don't address, you know, other aspects of feedback that are constructive and helping students address growth opportunities. It just means that we are balancing that feedback by highlighting both what the student is doing well and also where are the opportunities to grow. And so because we're specifically talking about collaborative and connected learning, scaffolding opportunities for peer teaching and peer feedback, and being really intentional about making sure that in those opportunities we're naming strengths and showing students how to recognize strengths in each other is important. So let's look at a few examples of what this can look like for teachers to find different ways to identify strengths outside of academics. You'll go to the next slide. This is one of my favorite prompts, and I also heard that this is trending on Twitter, so you can do hashtag, I wish my teacher knew, and there's a lot of different folks sharing around what they've learned through this process. But it's a great prompt because, you don't know what kids are going to share. And oftentimes they can share challenges that they're grappling with at home and other, things or things that they feel good at, strong in their personal life. Maybe they're really good at sports and other things that, a teacher may not know. And so this really offers them a chance to share, what they are feeling and thinking about, outside of school. And that's a great way to tap into things that motivate them and understand where their strengths are. And so another thing, and some more examples of things is just that we mentioned is using strength-based feedback. And so this is a few just examples of what that might, look or sound like. And so it can often be similar to growth mindset feedback, where you are really focusing on the way students are engaging in the process of learning, the effort that they're putting forth, how they maybe are making improvement, even if they haven't met, a goal, or, it's not 100% yet. And so just kind of looking for the different strengths that show up in the process. So showing curiosity, getting passionate or excited about something, making an educated guess. Maybe it wasn't perfect, but there was some logic and reasoning behind why they did that. And so recognizing that that's an important part of the learning process, being respectful to other people. And so all of these are just examples, but I think it's important to, as you're coaching teachers, to really be intentional about practicing this, because sometimes in the heat of the moment when you're teaching and there's so many things happening, if you haven't put some forethought into what are some of the strengths and places you might name, it's hard to do in the moment. And so giving teachers opportunities to practice this feedback and really think about where opportunities in a lesson might be to praise certain parts, tasks, and passions and curiosity and things like that, kind of noting where that might be in advance can also help make sure that it happens in the moment. So next, I wanted to share one of my favorite videos from the VILS program that I think really highlights the power of strengths-based learning and how technology can support collaborative and connected, powerful learning experiences. So we're going to take a look at this video, and it's about 3 to 4 minutes, so it's not very long, but I want you to really listen to what the students and teachers are saying and how strengths show up in this example.
Today started off with a question being asked, what they enjoy. In this case, it was football, and what the football players need to be successful, and using technology as an angle, and everything from, what do they do with cameras, and how can that help them be a better athlete. And that really came into even doing things like jumping.
We started out by having people jump to see how high they could jump. We took videos in slow-mo to see the number that they jump. And after we did R4, we reached out to a school in San Diego and we asked them if they could get 4 students to jump as well. We plotted it. Once we had everything on the chart, we put it into a graph and compared the data. They jump higher than our 4 students because their 2 girls jump a lot higher than ours, but our boys jumped higher than theirs.
Like I saw him bring up stuff today. He probably had no idea what he was learning in 7th grade, but he was saying that stuff today. I mean, that was true application. They applied science, looking at hypothesis, data collection, just real life skills of collaborating, working together towards a common goal.
Well, it's amazing that we're able to learn here and we're able to get people from other states from across the US to help us learn here, and we're helping them learn while they're helping us.
Man, you can be surprised in so many ways. I mean, when I saw one of my students who had a hard time in my class and he took the helm of a project that's being worked on, that was beautiful.
It felt a little bit odd because I don't do it a lot, but it felt kind of good though because it was fun getting to talk to a whole class and know that they were listening.
Okay, I just love that video so much. So I'm wondering what stood out to you in this example that really either connects to this idea of collaborative and connected learning, but also strengths and how those were leveraged in this example. And again, feel free to put it in the chat or come off mute. Yes, Carolyn. Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I don't know if you caught, because I know the video can go by pretty fast, but the teacher said this student who took the lead, yeah, found some skills he didn't know he had, ended up spearheading this project, and had previously been seen as someone who was maybe struggling in this class. And so I wonder, the data collection and graphing is not a big idea, right? I've seen that done as a worksheet. But the way that it was designed as a collaborative experience and the way technology was used to connect to another class, I think really changed this experience, especially for this student, and enabled him to kind of shine. I also don't know if you caught this in the beginning, but did anyone catch the question that they were trying to answer, or kind of what kicked off this idea? But the teacher had asked kind of what they were interested in, and the question was, I apologize for the background noise. I just wanted to mute that a bit. The question was, how can we use technology to make us better football players? And I thought, again, it's this idea that when we understand what students' strengths are, what motivates them, then we can connect the learning in a different way for them and make it a more collaborative experience that they're invested in. So the link is in the chat. I highly encourage you to rewatch the video because I pick up something new, every time I learn it. It's really a powerful example of that. Okay, so I think that gives you some ideas of, what a teacher should be doing. What are some things you can do as a coach to help make sure your teachers are equipped to do this? And I think, the first thing is to really help teachers see strengths in themselves in order to be able to see strengths more often. Again, a lot of times our school systems are designed around identifying challenges and fixing them. And this gives us a deficit focus often. And so I think we have to make an intentional effort to incorporate strengths into our language, into our conversations. And so a great place, and then we start seeing it more, right? The more we talk about it, the more we name them, the more we can start to see them. And so naming this for teachers, helping teachers see their strengths is a great place to start as a coach, and really practicing some of these things with them. You know, what does your teacher wish you knew about them as a coach? And what do they see as their strengths? What versus what do you see as their strengths? And how can you kind of discuss that and help them leverage that in their teaching practice in the same way that we want them to do with their students? And so this can be really powerful. And then, so just helping them name those strengths and helping them reframe that thinking is really powerful, giving them more language to that. So having lists of strengths and just talking through which one of these showed up, and understanding that, as we talk a lot about in learner variability, different strengths are going to show up in different contexts. They're not fixed. So you can be really strong, you know, your background knowledge can be really strong in one subject and not another. And so what can be an asset for you in some cases may be a deficit in others. And so just understanding that this idea of strengths is going to change and grow, and that we don't want to, you know, give students or teachers a label, you know, that makes them feel stuck in that way. Okay, next slide. So let's give it a whirl ourselves. So let's see, because sometimes it can be hard to see the strengths in every situation. And so I have a couple different scenarios I want to share with you and see if we can identify the strength. All right, so let's look at this first one here. I'm going to read it. So this is from a high school teacher, and she says, as I scanned the class the first day of school, I saw Anna, a small young girl who had recently immigrated to the United States. She was sitting alone, clutching her new school-issued tablet like a shield. When I looked at her, she seemed to visibly flinch and draw herself tighter against the wall. And so I'm wondering in this moment, what strengths would you see with this information so far, this observation? And I'll just share for myself, you know, of course, I gravitate towards, she seems scared, right? Like that's, that's what my mind goes to, but what is the strength? You know, I have to work on this too. So the teacher is observant, the teacher is aware. And what is the, I'm sorry, I should have clarified. Yes. And what would you see as the student's strength? Yes, Louis. Hope I'm saying it right. Is it Louis or Luis?
Either way, it doesn't matter.
Okay. Yes, exactly. So the teacher is aware, that's a strength for her, and the student is scared, but she came to school anyways, right? And so if you can click the next. And so what the teacher said is she was very brave, right? Because brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you're scared and you do it anyway, right? You show up. And so just naming that she was brave to come to a school where she knew no one, and that, you know, student made the student feel better that she saw, you know, a strength in her. And so again, helping teachers see that there are still strengths in students, even when they also see the challenges. Yes. Yes. This is, I don't know what your name is, but you're showing up as numbers. That's a great strength point, that to enrich the diversity that she brings to the classroom. Awesome. Well, let's try one more. You can go to the next slide. All right. So this one is an example from a different teacher. And sorry, I hooked that back. All right. Javier was a gift to us, an English learner whose home language is Spanish. He joined our 7th grade class after being out of school for 6 months. Prior to enrolling in our school, he had recently moved across the country and was in transition living in homeless shelters with his large family. You can click to the next part. At first, Javier answered questions very quietly, and his eyes often looked toward the floor or quickly around the room. Also, he often got out of his seat without permission and walked in a small circle near his desk. What do you see potentially as strengths of Javier based on the information you have so far? And if you're not sure, I'll say adaptable, absolutely. He did answer questions, yes. He participated. Multilingual, absolutely. All great strengths. I would also say, a strength that this teacher chose to highlight after having some strengths-based training was that, he is not just what he did, but what he didn't do. He didn't run out of the room. He didn't disrupt class. He may have gotten out of his seat, but he stayed near his desk. And so he was kind of doing these things to manage his, to kind of self-manage his, anxiety or uncomfortableness in the classroom. And so being able to talk to him about, doing that and sharing expectations and saying this is okay, and giving him the flexibility to take breaks when he needs to, and being able to name when he needs that can be a strength. And so I think the important thing here is just to understand that sometimes strengths are also in what a student didn't do. Didn't leave, he didn't yell out, he didn't disrupt the class. Okay. So here are some other examples of ways you can reframe negative thinking. I am not, go ahead and click the next. So here's a statement you may hear from a student. I'm not good at math. I never get any math problems right. And an important thing is to consider sometimes, what evidence do you have, right? And sometimes we make these statements, but they're a bit of hyperbole, right? They're an exaggeration that describes our feelings, but not what's actually true. And so if you click on the next slide, what may be true is, on the last quiz, they got 5 problems right out of 9, and before they only got 3. And so while 5 out of 9 may not be the score you want, you can see that there is improvement. And so the reframe here would be, I'm getting better at math. I do get some problems right. So click on the next. Yeah. So again, as a coach, helping teachers see these opportunities to identify strengths and reframe deficit thinking is a really important part, I think, of coaches supporting strength-based learning. And if we're thinking about how technology can support this idea of collaborative and connected learning and strengths-based learning, there are lots of ways to use technology to, increase the connectivity, like in the video we saw, where they were talking to a class in another state doing the same thing. And there, kids have lots of different strengths with technology. And so figuring out what those strengths and interests are is another great way to celebrate their expertise and help identify where technology can support that. But I wanted to share another tool with you, which some of you may already be familiar with this if you saw any of my other powerful learning sessions, but it is the Learner Variability Navigator. And Todd, I'm wondering if you don't mind quickly just popping over to the Navigator, and I'll just highlight a couple of things. So when you're here, if you want to click on, let's do literacy 4-6 model. I just wanted to share a couple of ways you can use this free tool to help identify strengths that may be outside of, you know, the typical strengths you might think of in an academic setting. So if you go to the factor map, and let's just, if you hover over background knowledge, so what you see here are all the factors that support literacy knowledge in 4-6, and it goes across this framework. So let's think about something like background knowledge. Sometimes that can be a strength, sometimes it can be a challenge depending on the context. But also you can see all the other factors that are connected. So let's think about, there's other ways to help understand that even when background knowledge may be a challenge, maybe one of these other factors is a,
thank you for checking. How's your mom?
is a
She's
strength.
good.
Excellent.
This doesn't work.
So just understanding the different factors and connections and really seeing where some strengths may be across this whole child framework. Another way you can use this to help identify strengths is to go to strategies. And so if you look at the strategies tab, you can see all the strategies that are listed for this model. And again, identify strategies that may be a strength. Oftentimes when we're giving students a collaborative task, there's going to be a lot of different strategies that are used. They may have vocabulary that they need to learn, as well as, you know, research and other things. And so helping them understand what strategies are going to be a strength for you in this task and what strategies may be more challenging. And making sure that you name, like, hey, you can leverage these strategies when you feel challenged. So maybe vocabulary in this topic is going to be challenging for you, but you are great at graphic organizers. And so why don't we find a way to use graphic organizers to support your vocabulary? And so again, I think this can just help you with teachers identify what might be some strengths and challenges for different students and how you might want to name that for them in a given project or lesson. All right. Thank you, Todd, for going out and doing that. So I wanted to check in before we get into our activity and just kind of see if you have any questions about how strength-based learning can support connected and collaborative learning. So if you'll let me know in the chat, either 1, I'm unclear, 2, I understand how strength-based learning can support connected and collaborative learning, or 3, I got this, I'm ready to explain it to my teachers. Let me know, and I'm happy to answer any questions at this point based on what we've shared so far. All right, lots of 2s, that's awesome. Great. We also have on the Navigator, one of the strategies we have is a strength-based approach. And so you're welcome to check that out inside the different models that are most relevant to your work and get a sense for other resources and examples of what that looks like in different classrooms. But I wanted to take a minute now and practice using the Navigator to identify some factors and strategies that might show up as strengths in some different scenarios. And so what we're going to do for our challenge today is we have, I'm going to put a link to this document in the chat. Sure, hopefully everyone can open that. Yeah, that should be up. So you should be able to see this as view only. You can make a copy in order to be able to type into it. There are 3 different scenarios you're going to choose one today, and then you're welcome to repurpose this if you choose to do some PD or practice with some of the teachers that you coach. But the idea is to work with a small group to kind of look at the information you have and think about what factors might show up as strengths for the student. What are some things you might want to do to understand the student better based on the information you have? So we talked about different prompts and other ways that you might identify strengths for a student. And so you can work with your group to identify that. There are 3 different scenarios to choose from. So if you want to take a minute and scroll through the different scenarios and see if you want to pick scenario 1, 2, or 3, and then you'll have the option to go into the breakout room and discuss that scenario using the navigator. And I will drop that in the chat as well. So if there's no questions about the activity, we'll open the breakout rooms and you can go to the one that represents the scenario you want to discuss. So if anyone wants to share a bit about what they discussed or what they kind of noticed in their scenario, welcome that in the chat or just come off mute.
I guess I can go for our group chose Dylan, and things that stood out to us were things of like his full immersion and high energy in topics he enjoys, like math and science, and the lack thereof in his reading and literacy classes. So when we focused in on those different interests and his like enjoying to be creative, one of the weaknesses that we focused in on to see that we could tie to his strength was his self-regulation, because usually students with high energy sometimes struggle with self-regulating. So when trying to tackle his weakness of his literacy and self-regulation with adding to his strength, we thought of the things he liked were like art. So creating visuals for the informative writing piece would tie in a strength into something he's struggling with, or explaining his thinking, or it said it worked well with groups. So collaborative writing and those kinds of things brought in the strengths he already had into a subject he wasn't as strong in.
Thank you so much for that example. What I love about that is that you are really looking at, again, strengths and challenges and how to use one to balance the other and finding those connection points. So I think that's exactly what we want our teachers, to do, is to not just see everything as, well, this is the challenge, right? But okay, well, what are the strengths and how can we leverage those to help students persevere when they're challenged and understand themselves as learners, right? Because that empowers them through the process. Yana, that's a great question. No, it doesn't. If you're just looking at the strategies tab, it tells you they're just in ABC order. But if you actually click on a factor, you get a description of that factor, and underneath it are all the strategies that support that factor. And so I think what it really does is help you understand which strategies work best to support or mitigate the negative impact of a specific factor. And so that, I think, is what helps you identify strategies more strategically.
So can I ask, when I'm in that page inside of one of the factors, and then it says research-based strategies for this factor, but there are a lot. So is that in order, or that's also just we should?
No, that is just ABC order again. And
Okay.
so the idea is, what strategy works best is really going to depend on your context and your student. And so as a coach, I think understanding which strategies support which factor and then talking through with your teacher what makes the most sense to try with this student in this lesson, and kind of figuring that out together.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I know we're almost out of time, but I hope that you can take this activity and repurpose it to try with your teachers, maybe change up the scenarios to fit students that you work with, and help them really understand, just like Lewis and his group did, how to turn, challenges that we see, find those connection points between factors and strategies, and turn them into strengths. So thank you so much. I'm going to put my email in here. If you have any other questions, or you're trying to use the Navigator to support your coaching or do professional development, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I think we have time for maybe one more share or one more question before I turn it back over to Todd. Close this out. Any other burning questions? Well, I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I did enjoy talking with Michelle in room 3, and I thought, we were talking about the strategy worked examples, and how to leverage technology and Miro board to show worked examples and then add collaboration around those worked examples